Hi, everyone. My name is Stephenie Wilson Peterson, and I am a middle grade author, and I am here today with Matthew Smith and Maxwell. Is that pronounced Nicoll? Is that correct?
Nicoll, yes.
Okay, close.
Close enough.
I got really close. And they are the authors of this super fun book, Slamdown Town. And I have to say, I just got this yesterday and I haven't been able to finish reading it, mostly because my 7-year-old won't give it back to me.
Oh, good.
He got really mad when I told him that during the live stream I wanted to have the book with me. He's like, you need to remember that I'm on page 77 because if you lose my spot, I'm going to be so mad at you. Yeah. So it's a good sign they like kids
good.
like
that's
it.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. So I am just the concept is so fun to me. Can you guys tell the audience a little bit about the book?
Sure. So the book is about a kid named Ollie. He's 11 years old, and he lives in a small town that holds the local wrestling promotion, Slamdown Town, which is the name of the arena. And the arena is sort of like the D, E, and F list wrestlers. You know, you don't have Stone Cold or The Rock or, anyone like that there. These are people who are, no one you would know. But he himself is a huge fan of them. His mom actually was a wrestler there. And so he goes there each weekend with his best friend and his older brother. And they just absolutely love wrestling. And he wants nothing more to become a wrestler, but he's only 11 years old and he can't. But he ends up getting the chance to become a wrestler once his brother gifts him a stale piece of already been chewed bubble gum that was used to belong to his favorite wrestler. And it magically transforms him into a wrestler and allows him to wrestle. So he ends up trying out, he makes the team, and he is able to live out his life. But the problem is he's still an 11-year-old kid. And so that's sort of the gist of the book.
No. Well, I just have to say the concept is so fun. And like I said, my 7-year-old instantly loved it. My other 2 kids are in line because he claimed it first, because when I unpacked the box, he was there and he assumed that meant it was his. But all 3 of my kids are 7, almost 8, then 11 and 13. And they all just like, that is so cool. I want it. Why does he get to read it first? So I think you hit the nail on the head for the intended age range there.
That's awesome to hear.
So I think it is just so interesting that the 2 of you write together. How did that come to be?
So Matt and I have always been, we've been friends for a long time, and it feels like forever. And we went to school together. We were both RAs at School for the Visual Arts in Manhattan. It's a film and television school. And we, have a mutual love of film, of writing, and over the years, we've collaborated on a bunch of different projects. And when the opportunity presented itself for us to write this together, we immediately jumped at the chance. I always say that I like writing alone, but writing with someone else makes me a better writer, and I feel more confident. I think it's a totally different experience. And so, yeah, I just, for this project, I think we sort of felt that our voices together would sort of lead to the best product. And yeah, we just had a really good time working on it together.
And I know writing with Max, he has a really good ability when it comes to looking at large picture and structure and narrative and pacing. And that's something where I really appreciate his ability to see that larger scale. And that's something where I find that to be a great benefit as a writer myself. That's an area that you can see that throughout the book and how he helps with that. And then in addition, he's just a really funny guy. So I enjoy working with him, making him laugh, and having him make me laugh all the time as I'm reading the book. The amount of times I would snort with actual laughter while reading, and I still do at sections within the book. That's always fun to be able to write with someone who makes you laugh and has that understanding of like the larger scale as well.
Yeah, and I think Matt has an uncanny ability to really like find a character voice very quickly. And so I think like the 2 of our, skill sets work really well together. And we've just sort of this wasn't the first thing that we worked together on, but we definitely developed, we've developed a shorthand over the years. And I think putting it, this was our first book, so it was a learning experience. We were learning together. But I think, we sort of came equipped with a few years of having worked together, and we're able to sort of hit the ground running and learn together.
That's so cool. I have some friends who are great critique partners, but I've never considered actually writing something with anyone else. So it's the process just seems to me like, I don't mind-boggling. How can you do that? But it sounds like you guys have a really great working relationship, so that would make it a lot easier. So were you guys always big fans of wrestling, or was it just a fun concept? Or
I think like as a kid, especially during when we, wrestling was really big in the 90s when we were kids, and we were the perfect age for it. And I think, we definitely had a period of time where we were huge fans of WWF and WCW and Goldberg and all of those guys. And, a lot of them have since gone on to, The Rock and John Cena and to sort of have careers outside of wrestling, which I think just shows the, staying power of those personas.
Right.
But I think that, once we started talking with Abrams about the project and they wanted to do a book that was about wrestling, and I think it was more sort of remembering why we liked it as the kids, and sort of looking at, wrestling is having a huge comeback now with the AEW and the WWE, and it's having a bit of a resurgence. And we were sort of asking ourselves why that was. And, we always sort of talked about, like with Marvel, you have the superheroes, and wrestling is sort of like superheroes in real life, kind of, they have these larger than life personas, and they're battling it out in the ring every single week. And so we sort of tried to key into that, what made people like the Marvel movies, and sort of, can we take that sort of same energy and infuse it into this sort of rundown, small town, backwater wrestling, community. And I think that's kind of what we tried to do. If you notice, like a large number of the wrestling personalities are sort of more, I think, over the top and outrageous than they are in reality. And so that was sort of what we were trying to key into.
And that's, we drew upon that as well when we were looking for inspiration. I was always a big fan of Undertaker growing up. And when you really look at, who the Undertaker is, as far as, what his role is on that show, goes through quite a bit of leeway and evolution, but he, has come back from the dead. He has ethereal powers, and, that it lives and breathes within that world. And that's always what drew me more into wrestling, was the kind of more outlandish part of it. And the fact that it was accepted, and it's part of what makes wrestling so great, is that you can have that and everyone's, yep, that is exactly what happened. He came back from the dead, and he's gonna, come and get you, the boogeyman.
Yeah.
I grew up, I'm guessing, about the same time as you guys, because my brothers loved the same wrestlers. Like most girls, was ew, gross. But hearing you talk about the Undertaker, and I have these flashbacks to my brothers getting so excited over these wrestling matches. Especially my younger brother just got really into it, and all the little action figures, and it really was almost like superheroes to the kids who grew up with it. I think that's definitely kind of the vibe I've gotten from the part my son has allowed me to read. But it's definitely it's that larger than life kind of superhero vibe that I think so many kids really enjoy. So I think that's so fun that you've been able to do that. So is this is planned to be part of a series, correct? That's the goal with the book?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so we've already written the sequel, and it seems like it will continue on, and so we'll sort of see what happens. But yes, the idea is that you would continue in the world of Slamdown Town and see sort of where this goes, and where Ollie as Big Chew goes, and without saying too much, in the sequel, his best friend Nicoll ends up turning into a wrestler herself. The title is actually Ragtag Team, and so it's sort of this idea of, oh, you have a best friend who's your best friend in real life, but now that you both can turn into wrestlers, how do you work together in the ring? What conflicts in your personal life enter, as basically their friendship turns into a working relationship, and you sort of see how that sort of falls under strain. But I think like for us, one thing we tried to layer in this book is that, you know, despite the arena looking run down and grungy and disgusting, there actually is potentially, you know, magic or something mysterious hidden around every corner. So in book 1, you know, it's a wad of bubble gum. You know, in book 2, it might be a video game machine. In book 3, it might be someone's smelly used underwear. You know, and we like that idea of like low magic, and I think that's like funny and appealing to kids. And so yeah,
Right.
that's the idea.
Well, in a lot of ways, I feel like that also draws on wrestling in and of itself. You know, it's paying homage to a source of magic that you would find from the wrestling world, and therefore it you know, you would it feels more organic.
I really love just little hints of fantasy within any book, especially for this age range. I love that when you're 8 to 12-ish, that the world can still feel a little bit magical because they're starting to grow up a little bit and think they're too cool for things. And I think these little hints of magic in the stories that they're reading really help children be hold on to their childhood a little bit longer. So I think it's really fun. And I thought the idea of the chewing gum being at the source of his magical powers was hilarious.
Yeah, it was interesting how that even like came to be, because, you know, like one of the earliest sort of elevator pitches for this was like Big meets the WWE. And so we knew that, but unlike in Big, where Tom Hanks's character is an adult the entire time, we knew that wasn't what we could do here. And so we needed sort of an easy mechanism for him to sort of very quickly change, you know, from Big Chew back to Ollie. Right. So we definitely went back and forth over sort of, you know, what could that be? Could it be a belt? Could it be a mask? Could it be a cape? You know, and then I don't really remember how it came about. I think sort of as a joke, we were just like, yeah, what if it's like a piece of, you know, gum he finds like underneath his, you know, chair. And, you know, sometimes like those ideas end up becoming the best ones. And that's what we ended up doing. So very easy for him to sort of spit it out and to hide it and to lose it. And to, you know, there's a lot of conflict that can come from that.
I think it's great. I think it's just so much fun. And that's one of the things my son has been saying all day today, because he's been clinging to the book. It's gum. It's used gum. Oh, yeah. Just gets them excited. You know, they love the gross. So,
yeah. There's a lot of random pieces of corn stuck in there and hair, and you know, we didn't shy back there.
I feel like every time we wrote about the gum, every time we described it, we added like one other weird thing he would find on. Like, oh, now it has a hair on it. Oh, now it has corn. Oh, now it's gray. You know, just that kind of thing is funny to us, I think.
That's great. I think that's hilarious. So you said that Abrams approached you. So that's an unusual start to a book. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Talk.
Yeah, so Abrams, so my background is in television writing. I work for Sesame Workshop, and I've written for them for a number of years, as well as other Nature Cat, Esme and Roy, and a couple other kids TV shows. And they were looking for an IP that they had developed internally, and they were looking for young writers to sort of come on and work on it. And they, you know, noticed an opportunity in the market, you know, where there is not much, you know, wrestling novels, and there is not much, you know, there's some sort of sports humor, but, you know, the majority of it isn't there. And so I was approached, and they sort of said, hey, you know, what do you think of this? Is this something you might be interested in? And I sort of looked at it, and I was definitely interested. And, you know, I said, I think, you know, a collaborator of mine, Matt Smith, might be really good to sort of bring on. I think he has a really funny voice. It will work, you know, well at this project. And sort of from there, we developed it. But, you know, at the time, it was really just Big meets the WWE. And so we were able at that point to sort of develop it as we saw fit. And I think, you know, one of the things that we wanted to do is really lean into humor. And one of the things that we wanted to do is really, you know, like for us, like we talked about, like, you know, like Happy Gilmore and The Water Boy and The Mighty Ducks and all that kind of stuff, like movies we had grown up on, and we didn't see like many books like that. And so we thought there was an opportunity to sort of do that type of story in this world, which was sort of largely unexplored. So, but yeah, that was sort of, yeah.
I agree. There's not a lot out there. I can't think of a similar books. I think that's a good sign. So you're doing something different. Do you have projects planned for when you're done with the series? Or are you working on it now?
It was our focus up until a few weeks ago when we handed in the second book, and so now we have a little bit of downtime, and we're kicking around some a couple ideas that we think might be fun and a little different. So, but they're pretty early on at this point.
Yeah. I understand those ideas take time to fully form. I've had a particular book idea in my head for I don't know, about 6 months. I knew the character, I knew the setting, I knew everything except for how it was all going to resolve. And some books I can write without knowing the resolution, but this one, it affected all the other steps. And so I just couldn't make myself write it until last night. I was like, oh, I know what happens in this book. And then I could finally write the story. So I think you kind of have to play with them sometimes. So there are other books that I felt ready to write before. I kind of knew where I could, play with the voice and the character and go back and forth with this particular book until I just knew. So
yeah, it's interesting. We've had ideas that have lasted for years, and they just haven't quite congealed yet into that final form of coming into something where that's the final form. That's where it's going to be the story that you want to tell. And yeah, it's interesting how some of those ideas stay. And, some of them you think in the moment, this is going to be the one, this is going to be great. And then you wake up the next day and you're like, what? No. Yeah.
I've had a few that way that I was like, how did I ever think that could be anything? What was that? But
yeah, I feel like too, for Slamdown Town, like a lot of the conventional approaches that we would take to developing something and figuring out the structure and the characters, whatever, like we had to sort of relearn because we had never written anything with a sport element to it before, and the very fact that every weekend Ollie needs to go and wrestle is this sort of thing that when you're breaking out a story, a typical story, and you're looking at but therefore whatever your bag of tricks are, like you don't really account for like, oh, there has to be a match every single time, and everything needs to lead into that match, and then there needs to be a post from the match, and so that I think we had worked together on a number of things, but when we sort of sat down to write this, that was another sort of wrench that was thrown into it. And, so we definitely looked at things like the Mighty Ducks and, Waterboy and Happy Gilmore, and sort of, saw how they were able to incorporate the actual element of the sport into the book, into their stories. And so, yeah.
You just named so many of my favorite movies growing up. I really did. The Mighty Ducks was everything at my house when I was a kid, especially. But all of those, Happy Gilmore, I still rewatch a few times a year. So, do you have? Were there any specific challenges that, even if you are writing with your friend and someone you're used to writing with, did you ever butt heads and have parts of the story you didn't agree on, or? Am I asking a bad question?
A lot of our process comes with outlining. In order to properly go ahead and actually begin the process of writing the first draft, we have to have that solid outline in order to do that. Otherwise, we don't know what it is that Max is going to be writing and what I'm going to be writing for a particular chapter. So most of the discussions that end up happening are during that particular outline phase, where we get really into it, dialogue, jokes, character moments, all within this huge Frankenstein document that ends up being pretty massive. And based off of that, once we figure that is good, we're then able to independently go off and really start creating the actual process of the actual chapters. So I would say most of it ends up being hashed out during that outline phase, where I think we try to we attempt to convince each other or make each other laugh. If I've gotten him to laugh, then I know that that's something to stay. But at the end of the day, we know that it's got to serve that structure. It's got to follow the flow of but therefore, and as long as it's doing that, then that's probably that's serving the story then.
Yeah, if there's any, I think downside to collaborating with someone, it is that there's very little room for improvisation once you are actually starting to write. Because if I change something, even something minor in an earlier chapter, and Matt is going off and he has his assignments and he's doing his chapters, well, that obviously affects, what's happening there. So I think all of our disagreements really, we probably overwrite at the outline stage so that we can feel confident at least being like, if we were just to expand this, we would basically be happy with the D1 or whatever draft we're on, because we sort of jump back and forth after each draft. We tend to sort of go back and then create another sort of bigger outline just to make sure we're on the same page, hash out all ideas there. But yeah, no, I don't think we really disagree all that much. I mean, a part of it is like working, I trust Matt and I would hope he trusts me. And so I think that it's like, I think it's like he said, where it's like, I'm just trying really, you're writing for Matt. And I think Matt is really writing for me. Can I make Max laugh? Is this something that excites him? And that's, I think, like the huge, for me anyway, benefit of collaborating with someone is that you don't have those, because when I'm working alone, if I am working on something and I come up with a great idea, then I'm second guessing myself and is it only, and so I think that sort of, if there's disagreements, it's earlier on.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Sounds like a very organized process. I don't outline, I have an odd process where I usually on my longer projects write like the first 3 chapters to figure out my voice. Mm-hmm. And even though I have a character, I have a setting, I know where I want it to end up, but I don't outline until I figure out my character a little bit, if that makes sense. And so often those first 3 chapters will just get thrown out. They're kind of, they're practice chapters really, but I have to know my characters by writing with them. And then I go and I do a very, very rough, like these are my main beats, kind of Save the Cat style. And I will give about a sentence per beat, but then I just write to it. So for me, all of that organization is like, I don't know how I would be that organized, but you'd have to be to work with a partner. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and that was the benefit of working together for many years on different projects. We had already developed that sort of language together, that process together, and then it was taking that and applying it towards the process of writing the book, which certainly had its own unique challenges. But I was incredibly grateful that we already had that established language there to be able to work off of that.
That makes sense. The existing relationship would make writing a book together easier.
And from our TV background, I think we just we obviously stole a lot of the practices that come from there. You do the outline, then you have very little time to turn around your D1, and so you basically are, you have to just trust in your instincts that you got it right there, and sort of make your revisions. Hopefully that there's nothing too structurally incorrect, but there was. I mean, that was like one. We didn't get it right in the first draft, and we were making changes, as I'm sure everyone does. But yeah, book 1 was definitely a learning process, and for book 2, I think we were able to apply a lot of the things that we learned in book 1, and everything was a little bit. That had its own unique challenges as well, but it was a little bit more streamlined.
Oh. Do you have a release date for book 2 yet?
Yes, February 16th, 2021.
That's exciting. So you didn't get COVID bumped then? Hopefully.
As far as we know, no. we released on January 28th, which was obviously right before, and then this hopefully it'll be right afterwards. So I don't, if anything really affected, in terms of with COVID, I think it was personal because this was our sort of year to sort of figure everything out and make connections and go to different festivals and sort of see how all that. Obviously the norm is not happening now, but I think in response to that, it almost has shined a light, on sort of, well, this is how things were done and this is how things can be done, like coming on, and talking to you here. And I think a lot of people were improvising, and because of that, it's actually, allowing us to learn and to sort of see how things are done. So.
Yeah, my book released a week ago today. So
yes, congratulations.
Thank you. So I've definitely been in the throes of all the COVID, no in-person events whatsoever for, who knows when. I'm in North Carolina where we are starting our phase 1 of reopening, but it's just like very limited retail, where it's a long time. It's good. I mean, I think everywhere it's going to be a long time before we're gathering in large groups. But I do think that these kinds of events have really shown different ways we can connect that, I might have lost opportunities, but I also gained opportunities because of
definitely
how everything's going. I'm going to open up. We'll see if any of our viewers have comments for you. So if you're watching live and you have a comment, if you type it, I can put it up on the screen, and Matt and Max can answer. So we'll see. Anybody's brave enough to ask a question. Sometimes the first one is the hardest. While we're waiting, is there anything you would like your readers or the viewers to know about your book? Anybody who might be considering picking it up? Anything they should know about it?
I guess the only thing I would say is that we noticed a sort of recurring theme in a lot of the reviews that we've gotten, which is a lot of them tend to start out with, look, this is wrestling, but it's actually really funny and cool. And I think that was a little bit of an unexpected, because we understand that wrestling is somewhat niche. And we know that, people might not pick it up just because they don't like wrestling or whatever. But I think that's, I think we've been pleasantly surprised that, people who weren't wrestling fans were able to like the books. It seems like a lot of people, a lot of different ages have liked the books, boys and girls have liked the books. So it seems, that I think if I could tell anyone anything, that would be that. You don't need to be a fan of wrestling to enjoy it. It's fun, it's funny, has a good story. There is a big sort of anchor that we tried to include, which is, the relationship between Ollie and his brother. I think it's like a very universal one in terms of a brother getting older, a sibling getting older, and you not wanting to hang out with them as much. And so,
right.
I think there's in between the wrestling, there is that sort of nice little family story.
That's great. We have Stephen asking, I would love to know how much thought goes into the book's themes while you're writing it.
That's a good question.
Asking the tough questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like theme, and Matt, maybe you can chime in on this too, but I think like theme is like a dangerous, it's kind of dangerous because like you can sort of look at and get hung up on a theme and say, okay, everything's not sort of addressing the theme or hitting on the theme. And I think Matt and I, a lot of kind of what came out of, a lot of what themes presented themselves, we didn't intend to necessarily be pushing those. And I think, just looking at the story and sort of seeing, okay, well, a kid can turn into a wrestler and get in the ring and wrestle his favorite people. That's really, really fun. And that was sort of where we started. And then a theme that sort of emerged is that, as Ollie becomes Big Chew more, someone else, he actually starts to learn more about himself. And so we didn't set out to say, oh, when I walk in someone else's shoes, I actually learn more about myself. Or but I think as we were writing it, we started to realize that, that's just one example, but something like that is present. And then once you realize it, okay, then you sort of, go back and put it in. And
yeah, and I would say that also holds true in terms of Ollie's friendship with Tomiko, where, the more that he ended up gaining as Big Chew, the more he ended up losing with his friendship with Tomiko. And that wasn't necessarily put in there by accident, but it became more of a prevalent theme as we discovered that it was there. And so then we continue to cater to that as it goes along. So I would say, as Max pointed out, it's more something that develops as you're going through. And then for us, we identified them and then we're able to go back and cater more to them.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Grace's Ghosts, when I was writing that, by the end, it had a very strong theme about family and supporting your family, even when they're not like you. And I'd have to give away more story than I'd like to, but I definitely did not, when I set out to write the story, I was writing a story about a girl whose friends were ghosts. And I didn't think I was writing a family story, but it definitely turned into that as I was writing it. As I realized how important that theme was to the storyline, I developed it further, but it wasn't, I think a lot of times you start writing with maybe the big idea in mind, and then those more subtle themes kind of come into play as you continue.
Yeah,
anyone
for
else?
instance, with Slamdown Town, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, continue.
Very early on, we looked at kind of what the key components of wrestling were. And we kind of broke it down into costumes, smack talk, and moves. So we knew that we wanted to kind of create a structure that benefited that. But then off of that, we were able to identify themes within each, with each section. So those didn't start. It didn't start from, finding your own voice or, defining who you are, but by having the plot there and the structure, that allows you to then layer the theme on top of it.
Right. They started out as like, if no one knows what wrestling is, what are like the sort of core pillars we can tell them? Basically it's like a create your own wrestler type of thing. And yeah, so what starts out as basically something trying to be informative turns out to something that can be a theme, that can be really funny. And a lot of like the best characters came out of that. And I think we tried to distill each wrestler that Ollie faced down into to represent that thing. So I think,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
We had someone asking, what was the reason for leaving out Ollie's father?
So I can take this one. So that actually comes from personal experience. I grew up with my mom in a single parent household, and she, is someone that I greatly respect and was able to teach me everything that I needed to know, and was, strong and knowledgeable. And she's the reason I'm writing today. We would write books together on her old Macintosh, the actual desktop. Save them the floppy disk. Not sure where those are right now, but boy, would I like to know where they are. But yeah, I wanted to. I discussed this with Max when we were going over Ollie's parents. I wanted to, normalize. I wanted to show that, this is my personal experience, and perhaps this is an experience that kids are also going through. And, at the end of the day, in the same way that, my dad didn't really have any direct impact on my life or my development, we just felt that that was important to bring into Ollie's life, and to not make a big deal about it in the way that, it was normal for me growing up. And I felt that it was a good opportunity to look at Ollie and show that, it's normal for him as well.
No, I think that's great. And I love that you made the mom a wrestler. It's not common, and I think it's fun. And I think it's great to see families can all work in different ways, and men and women can hold whatever job they want. We don't have to follow stereotypes. So I just thought that was pretty awesome. We have a few other questions. Are there any deleted scenes, characters that didn't make the book?
Are there any deleted scenes or characters that didn't make the book? I mean, yes, there are a lot of them, and they're probably not even worth, if they weren't good, that's why they're not in there. I think we had, there were a number of, like a good example, I guess, is like in the opening couple of chapters, you see Were Wrestler facing, you see Were Wrestler in a match, and we have in the final version of the book, he's there because he ultimately becomes the big bad, and Ollie needs to. So we needed to set him up. And I think like in earlier versions and earlier drafts, Were Wrestler wasn't in that opening match. It was another funny wrestler or whatever it was. And I think it was things like that where it was, okay, now that we've sort of figured out, we know Were Wrestler is going to be sort of the big bad of the book, and he's going to go to him. It might be, as we sort of got through our first draft of it, oh, hey, that's a good opportunity to actually set him up there to make it known and sort of see him in action. And so there's a lot of things like that. I guess actually thinking about it now, in an earlier draft too, Ollie actually had 3 best friends. And so we had the idea of that each of his best friends would be a pillar of wrestling. So one would be like awesome at making costumes, one would be awesome at smack talk, which ended up becoming Tomiko, and one would be awesome at moves. And I think we, along with our editor, were just like, they're sort of getting lost a little bit. And I,
Yeah.
you know, and so we ended up sort of collectively, we thought that Tomiko is the strongest. And so she became the best friend. And that idea of having there be opponents that were emblematic of the pillars of wrestling was how that happened. So he then faces Gorgeous Gordon Gusset and Silver Tongue and Barbell Bill, who are sort of very specifically geared towards him learning those lessons, and by extension, the reader, you know, if they don't know about wrestling, learning about wrestling.
Makes sense. We have Lauren asking, how do you come up with the names and personas of the wrestlers? One of my favorites is Little Old Granny. Is she inspired by either of your grandparents?
Little known fact, my grandmother is actually a professional wrestler. No, she's not. No, I mean, Matt, you can answer this one. I think.
Yeah, a lot of times when we would go ahead and look at coming up with a wrestler, it would again just be like, how do I get you to laugh instantly? You know, a lot of our wrestlers show up once on a page and then they're out. And so with that, you know, you're just trying to come up with the silliest version of, you know, something normal usually. So, you know, you take Mac Truck, who's, ate with a chassis full of revenge, or you take the Bolt, who's got an electric personality, you know, you Were Wrestler. And, you know, with Little Old Granny, it was just one of those things where I think that even just started as an inside joke. And then we were like, no, Little Old Granny, definitely Little Old Granny. And, you know, she is by far, she has a special place in our hearts.
Yeah, spoiler alert for book 2. She became such a fan favorite that she's like completely blown out in book 2. So if you like Little Old Granny, there's a lot more of her to come.
All right, we have one more question here. What is the age bracket for your books?
8 to 12 years old. I think it probably skews, you know, probably closer to 8, 9, or 10. But, you know, I think if you're a fan of wrestling and or not a fan of wrestling, I think you can, you know, appreciate it. So if you're anywhere in that age.
All right. I think based on my kids' reactions, my very small, I have my test subjects in my house. It seems about right. My not quite 8-year-old is definitely the most intensely excited. But my 13-year-old, who thinks he's too cool for things, is definitely still kind of looking at it like, I could read that. That looks funny enough where I want to read that. So
yeah, I think wrestling is one of those things where, you know, if you are in that perfect age, you know, it's something that seems really, really awesome. And then as you know, get a little closer to 12 or 13, you maybe think, yeah, this is kind of ridiculous, you know, and we turn the ridiculousness up to, you know, 10 in this book. So yeah, I think I
think that's the appeal though, the ridiculousness.
Exactly.
For sure. I know because I parent kids this age, and I also teach kids this age. That's what keeps them reading, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. Oh, we have one more. Let's see. Which characters do you guys identify most with, if not Ollie?
I mean, I think I'm going to go first and take the easy answer. I identify with Ollie most. You know, I think that I mean, as the main character, it's his burden to carry, I think, some of the more, you know, relatable and real world beats. You know, I think that, you know, we really tried to, again, to sort of offset how ridiculous wrestling is, and they're potentially not having wrestling fans reading the book, that he, you know, would have a very real relationship with his brother, and he's going through, you know, struggles, and he's at school and he doesn't really like school and he doesn't really know what he's doing. And he's, you know, he has a best friend that he feels like he's letting down. And I feel like all of those are very relatable things. So yeah, I think, I mean, honestly, Matt, I'm going to answer for you. I feel like you're a little bit of a Tomiko, you know, like in a weird sort of way. You know, Matt, again, is like really funny, and like he, you know, I sometimes wouldn't think it. And I think some of our friends would be surprised, but, you know, like he's very quippy, he comes up with things very, very fast. And that's kind of who Tomiko is. And so in a weird sort of way, I think they ended up sort of, not to answer for you, Matt, you can.
I mean, I was going to say Linton Crackle. I mean, whenever you need to save $1, you save $1.
True. Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting question overall because you essentially try to put at least some part of yourself in every character, no matter how, outlandish you try to make them. There's got to be something in them that you can identify with on some level. But, I think Linton Crackle for sure.
It's great. Well, I really enjoyed having you on my YouTube channel, and I hope that everyone goes out and trying to line it up with the camera, finds a copy of Slamdown Town. Can't have mine because my 7-year-old won't give it up. So thank you guys so much. And
thank you.
Thank you. It was great to talk with you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.